All right, what's up, everyone? We're live. Thanks for coming online to join this live stream. So I've got David on today, who I think is a person who's knowledgeable about the history of veganism and the founding of the vegan society and stuff about Donald Watson and Leslie Cross and all these important figureheads in the movement. So we're gonna be live reacting to a documentary here from 2000 and was it 2016? It came out, yeah, July 2016 by the channel VegSource. It's called "You're Not Vegan," and essentially the documentary is a guy who's basically what we would call a plant-based guy who says you can be vegan for other reasons besides animal rights. Like, you can be just vegan for your health and not care about animal rights. As long as you eat a plant-based diet, you are vegan. This is what this guy is saying. Not only is he saying that, he says that's how the founders of the vegan society intended it to be. Although there may be some more nuance to his point. Now, just before we start, me and David both want to say we're not going to have an answer to every single point this guy has. There might be just some stuff we don't know. This guy might be like, yeah, then this happened in 1942 and this happened. And me and David will be like, well, we didn't hear that happen, blah, blah, blah. So we're just going to roll with it, see how we go. But generally, we do think that, obviously, as animal rights activists, this guy has got a very bad idea of what veganism is about. And we don't agree with him that these were the intentions of the founders. We say the founders, we're talking about the founders of the vegan society, obviously, because the practice of people rejecting animal exploitation has happened. Many people have done this throughout history. But David, did you want to say anything just before we start playing the video at all?
Yeah, I think this guy makes some very difficult to prove claims, or prove or disprove. Like he goes into detail like too much, and as if he was there.
Well, that might be part of his tactic.
Yeah,
that might be part of his shtick.
I think so.
Yeah. Oh, Chris Hines has just got a good comment here. He says you can start by recognizing the website he got all his info from is totally biased and doesn't even list all their sources.
Yeah.
So there we go. But you know what? We'll be charitable and we will leave Jeff, the guy behind VegSource, but to be innocent until proven guilty. So let's take a look at his claims. So we're going to share my screen now. Share screen. Right, can everyone see that? Hopefully you can. And right, David, what I want you to do, if there's any, I'm just going to play a lot of it generally. It's going to be pretty free-flowing, but you can just feel to like interrupt, to interject whenever you have a point. Just shout out and I'll pause. Okay.
Cool. Or I'll make a sign or something.
Yeah, cool. You can do that as well.
Okay.
All right, let's go.
Hey there. This video is about who can call themselves a vegan. There are a small group of vegans out there who like to go around and tell other vegans, you're not vegan, or you're plant-based, or you're this, you're that.
That's us.
And this video is to look at that question, and it's to kind of reassure people who are not sure if they're vegan or not, because of what someone else has told them, that you are a vegan if you're eating a vegan diet. And that's because Donald Watson, the guy who coined the word vegan, made a definition of vegan was someone who ate a vegan diet, no matter what reason. If you eat it for animal reasons, like he did, like Donald Watson did, if you eat a vegan diet for health reasons, like Donald Watson also did, if you eat it for the environment or any other reason, which Watson also did, you can call yourself a vegan. You don't have to be eating just for one.
Now, David, why are you shaking your head already? Let's start from there.
Because what I have read that Watson wrote is that the adopting a plant-based diet could benefit human health or could benefit the environment, but that was not the purpose of going vegan. So this guy is already twisting the words of Watson.
Yeah, and I just want to say it doesn't make sense to say you can be vegan for anything other than the animals, because there are ways to exploit animals that don't harm the environment or don't harm your health. Like, oh, I'm vegan for my health. I've just smashed an elephant in the face with a crowbar. Clearly, that's not vegan. Although this guy is ultimately going to form an argument to say that is vegan, so long as you're eating a plant-based diet. Let's continue.
One reason to do that. So enjoy the documentary. Donald Watson, the UK dietary pioneer, created veganism, and he founded the Vegan Society. He defined veganism to mean a diet.
All right, he didn't create veganism. I just want to say that. So Watson was key in formulating a term for what we now call veganism. Throughout history, they were often called other things. They might have been called vegetarians or strict vegetarians, or in the time of Pythagoras, some people who rejected all forms of animal exploitation were called Pythagoreans. So Watson didn't invent veganism as it was. He just was key in founding the Vegan Society, which was the first society that was dedicated to rejecting the exploitation of animals. Or as this guy's probably about to tell us, rejecting eating animals only, or eating the things that come out for them.
Although, George, I'm not sure that these Pythagoreans were not eating or anything like honey or maybe milk. I'm not
No,
sure.
you're right. That is true. So I think most so-called Pythagoreans would be now what we would call vegetarians. But there would have been some who rejected all forms of animal exploitation, because throughout history there just have been people who rejected the oppression of animals. So the earliest known vegan text there is by that Al-Mari, who wrote "I no longer steal from nature" in what would now be modern day Syria. It was mixed. You're right. So Pythagoreans at the time, they may have eaten eggs and honey and supported animal farming, but just not eaten flesh. But there would have been some so-called Pythagoreans who, like Al-Mari, rejected all forms of animal exploitation.
Or are we Almarians?
Maybe we're Almarians. There we go.
And he was driven out of the Vegan Society 6 years after he created the word, and a group of animal rights activists hijacked the organization and changed the definition. Once they got rid of Watson, they changed the definition of veganism 13 times. Most people have no idea what the real story is behind this. But basically what's playing out today and over decades is kind of history constantly repeating itself from what happened in 1950 to Donald Watson. What made me decide to do this video is I was doing a vlog about a month ago. I'd forgotten to bring some deodorant on a trip. So I showed myself buying some Tom's of Maine deodorant. It's a vegan company. And I got a little hate on my Tumblr, people saying, hey, Tom's of Maine, it may be vegan, but it's been bought by the Colgate company. Colgate tests on animals. It's not vegan, so you can't buy Tom's of Maine because it's not vegan. The parent company's not vegan. And if you do, you're not vegan. And I've seen exactly the same thing going down on my daughter Nina and Randa's channel. PETA approached them about doing a cruelty-free vegan makeup video, and I see comments on their video that says, hey, this beauty company was bought by L'Oreal. L'Oreal tests on animals, even though it's a vegan company. You can't buy it. It's not vegan because L'Oreal's not vegan. You're contributing to a non-vegan company, and if you do, you're not vegan. I don't know how people are coming up with this. This is just sort of a weird distraction that doesn't really do much for veganism. We see the same thing in the restaurant business, the vegan restaurant business. Gracias Madre is a restaurant chain here in Los Angeles, Cafe Gratitude. And the owners were vegan. They stopped being vegan. They slaughtered a cow. They own a farm and 6 cows. They slaughtered one of them, which I think is a big mistake, obviously. And an even bigger mistake is they wrote...
Hold on, has he just contradicted the whole argument he's about to make here? He said they stopped being vegan, they slaughtered a cow. Although maybe he's... No, maybe he's saying it the other way around, as in they stopped being vegan and then they slaughtered a cow. But if he means they slaughtered a cow and therefore they're not vegan, then that would be an argument against what he's about to say in the documentary. Sorry, I'll carry on.
Yeah, but also we should point out that his motivation for doing this video is that he got a lot of flack for stuff that wasn't vegan that he was doing, or Nina and Randa, his daughters, also, because correct me if I'm wrong, whoever was there at the time, I think that they were promoting clothing articles with leather, and they were promoting some stuff with honey, and there was like a controversy with them promoting some products with honey.
Yeah, I know nothing about these girls, so yeah, but thank you for that insight, David, and I'll continue now.
A blog post about it, which when it was caught by vegans, oh my God, what was the vegan reaction? So vegans bring out the pitchforks and torches when they see their favorite vegan restaurant is supporting someone who's in the meat business, but it's selective. There's no outrage for Veggie Grill. Veggie Grill is a vegan restaurant chain. It's owned by a company that also owns a chain of chicken restaurants, a chain of fish restaurants, and a chain of high-end leather companies.
Okay, so I want to say, unless I've misunderstood, I potentially agree with his point here. There is an inconsistency about parent companies and blah, blah, blah. I do see vegans say, you're not vegan if you shop at so-and-so because it's owned by so-and-so, or you're not vegan if you buy this product because it's an animal murdering business, but then that's like every company. And by the way, every company is owned by like 4 parent companies or something. There's like 4 conglomerates that pretty much like run the world. It's like Danone, the Coca-Cola company, flipping Nestle or someone. But yeah.
Yeah.
Native Foods Vegan Cafe is another one that I like, I've worked with, and there's the same issues with the ownership there. There's a new restaurant by Chloe, that's a chain that's just come to Los Angeles. They're owned by a chain of steakhouses. The parent company owns steakhouses, they own prime rib houses, they own burger. I mean, it's like a factory farming, but nobody's talking about these other restaurants. It's just that one for some reason. But let me say, if people did start attacking these other vegan restaurants, I wouldn't agree with that either. So basically, for some vegans, it's okay to eat at these other vegan restaurants where the owners are deeply involved in the factory farming business. But when the owner of Cafe Gratitude stops being vegan, then it's... Personally, I want vegan business to be successful no matter who owns them. So why is it that vegans get focused on judging and looking at other vegans and trying to evaluate them and saying they come up short? The only thing that vegans hate more than the meat industry are other vegans. And we're seeing this increasingly in social media and on the internet. For example, a YouTuber, very popular YouTuber, Carly Bible, recently went vegan. And she came out with this great video talking about being vegan, spreading this to millions of her fans. And what happens? What I call the ego vegans show up and start saying, you're not vegan, you wear leather and you're a makeup artist and your makeup is not cruelty-free, stop calling yourself vegan, you're plant-based, don't call yourself vegan. And what was the result? The result is actually Carly Bible said, okay, I won't call myself vegan. She even posted this little sort of retraction underneath the video that she's not vegan. So for those ego vegans, that's a...
The claim that it's ego driven, that it's just his point of view, or maybe or he does it just dishonestly, just to make a point. But the idea is that not everyone who exploits animals gets to say that they are against animal exploitation. That's the whole point of. It's like as if feminists were just condoning. Well, sometimes it's okay if husbands beat up their wives or something like that. It's ridiculous that feminists would go like, hey, shut up and get out of this meeting, or whatever. So
we've got a comment from Cliff here. I hope this can flash up on the screen. Yeah, there it is. So Cliff says, quote, is quoting Leslie Cross here. He says, to end the use of animals, to end the use of animals of man by food, commodities, work hunting, vivisection, and all other uses involving exploitation of animals by humans. Leslie Cross. Now, Cliff, here's the thing. I don't know if you've seen this documentary that we're reacting to, but the point that this guy is going to make here is that Leslie Cross was like this extremist who came into the vegan society and essentially hijacked it. And its original meaning that Watson wanted, this guy I think is going to claim, is that it's not really to do with animals unless you're talking about eating them. He said you can be vegan for environmental reasons and health reasons, so you can exploit animals in other ways, but as long as you're eating a plant-based diet, you're vegan. So that's what this guy is saying, and he's saying that was Watson's idea, and Cross came along and booted Watson out or something like that. But we'll get to that bit later. We'll see what he's talking about. All right.
Win. Here we had this high-profile, appealing, attractive person with a lot of ability to spread the vegan message, but we've like made sure that she stops calling herself a vegan, right? Because she's not evolved like we are. She better shut up. Fortunately, Carly Bible figured out that these are just kind of fringe vegans, these ego vegans, and she's now proudly calling herself a vegan and spreading the vegan message. So it didn't work in that case. Another case, Naomi Smart, somebody who's got a book.
Also, I don't know if you remember, but at that time, the I'm no longer vegan videos were made exactly by these people, and still today I think most I'm no longer vegan is just people like her who are just influencers, and they don't care if they use leather, they don't care if the makeup they use is vegan and cruelty free, and all these people that don't really care about animal rights and veganism.
They just saw it as a trend, and they don't understand the true principles, right?
Coming out that's full of delicious vegan recipes, I understand, and people are promoting it and getting excitement about it, but not all vegans. Once again, the ego vegans, we see people saying, Naomi Smart is not vegan, she eats honey. You know, she shouldn't call herself a vegan, she better not call herself vegan, she's not vegan. Why does this annoy me? Why does this subject annoy me? Well, I run a nonprofit organization just as a volunteer. I've done for about 18 years. It's called EarthSave, and we have a program called Meals for Health where we go into low-income areas and we teach people to be vegan. We put them on a 30-day program. And it's all volunteer, everybody that works in it. We bring food, we bring medical help. We bring all my friends volunteer, Dr. McDougall, Jeff Novick, Dr. Lyle, Rip Esselstyn, Dr. Clapper, all these guys volunteer their time on a weekend. We don't use the word vegan or the word vegetarian because, you know, that has baggage for some people. But these people, they decide it's a vegan program. Check out what their reaction was when they found out that we were bringing a vegan program to them.
And the night we met, they gave out a book. And I thought, this is good. This sounds good. I still don't know what it's all about. Hadn't heard the word vegan. Good thing I didn't, because I probably said, oh, I've heard of that. I wouldn't have come. I probably would not have come.
Rosemary went home and she called me and said, have you read the book? They're going to make us vegans. I said, you read the book wrong, Rosemary. They are not going to make all these folks in this church vegans. No way.
And they were going to try to convince me that this is the best way to go. This is, you know, and that's what happened, you know, and I was convinced.
So these people ended up all going vegan, and in fact, we do a follow-up. That was about 2 years ago, and 85% of them are still vegan. And
go on.
That was in 2016. So he says that 85% of them are still vegan. I doubt that's the case. Whenever you just promote plant-based diets, that's just like a time bomb waiting to happen. It's like these people at the least of the inconveniences are going back to exploiting animals for food.
Yeah, if there's no strong moral principle binding you towards something, why stick to it? I don't get how these people think that people are going to stick to veganism. if they'll just find a way one day to, eat foods in a way that doesn't damage their health as much, or eat in a way that doesn't harm the environment. They could be reducitarian on blah, blah, blah. Like, veganism simply cannot rely on the message that it's anything other to do with animals, because if you don't abide by the true vegan principles that this is about animal oppression, then there's just so many things that's going to essentially make you stray from the path.
Of course, they go to vegan, events, veg fests, and so on, and they start becoming vegan for all of the reasons, like most people normally do. These people in the church in Oakland, they're not vegan, okay? Stop calling yourself vegan. You have leather or whatever it is. You're not evolved, okay? I don't really care what those people have to say. It doesn't bother me. But those people often are, you can't change the meaning of veganism. You can't loosen up what it means. And then they show that they really don't know the history of veganism. So let's take a look at the history. Here's a website I want you to check out.
Also, these guys and everybody that says, like, it doesn't matter the reason why people stop eating animals or whatever, are just making utilitarian calculations as if it was like, okay, let's reduce the number of victims just for a little bit. And they don't care about the respect that the victims should deserve, should get from humans.
Yeah, the worst one they say is the animals don't care what reason people go vegan, which doesn't make sense, because I'm pretty sure the elephant being whipped with the bull hook does care. I'm pretty sure the fish trapped in the aquarium, or the whale in the swimming pool in SeaWorld, I think they definitely care why people go vegan.
Well, it's as if feminists again would say, well, we don't care if people don't rape us because there are there are policemen just on every corner.
Or because they might get an STI. Yeah, would that, if you stop raping because you're scared of what could happen to your health, that's great, It just sounds so stupid when compared to other injustices.
Sure.
After you watch this video, it's called vegansociety.today, and I'm putting a link to it down here in the description so you can go over. It's totally fascinating. It talks about the unvarnished history of the vegan society. The vegan society has gone to great lengths to kind of sanitize their history so that the public doesn't really know just how messed up it really is and what actually happened to Donald Watson in the beginning. But this website goes through it and it tells very specifically, and it gives links to back everything up. That's what I spend hours reading this and reading the underlying stuff. So I suggest, if you're interested, that you do so too. In a nutshell, this is what happened. In 1944, Donald Watson invented the word vegan, and he defined it as a diet. In 1945, he got together with his co-founders.
Okay, so big distinction there from what he just said and what's appearing on the screen. He said Watson invented the word vegan, but then on the screen he flashes up Watson invents veganism as a diet. Again, it's a contradiction in two ways. Number one, as we discussed right at the beginning of the stream, he didn't invent the idea of not oppressing animals. That was happening thousands of years ago, before Watson was ever born. Number two, even just the idea of a plant-based diet, he didn't invent that either. There have been people throughout history who just invented, who would have just been eating plant-based diets, even for non-ethical reasons. So I don't know what he means by Watson invents veganism as a diet.
And they decided to start the Vegan Society. It took off, hundreds of people were joining. In 1946, it attracted the attention of what today we would call some animal rights activists. And one in particular, a guy named Leslie Cross, who was sort of an animal rights extremist, very kind of strident guy, joined the Vegan Society, and he had this idea that, hey, it shouldn't just be about diet, it should be about animal rights. So he tried to influence Watson and the other original founders that let's change the definition to animal rights, but they were having a lot of success. A lot of people were joining. They didn't really want to do that. That's not who they were.
So Chris Hines is watching now on the stream. Chris Hines told me a really good analogy about this yesterday. He WhatsApped this to me. So thank you, Chris, for this great analogy here. Let me try and find it. Right, so Chris said about this, what he's just saying here. His argument is a bit like someone reading the first thoughts of an idea and then saying, well, that must be the idea, case closed, and then totally ignoring how the idea develops. It's like if the first draft of Star Wars didn't contain Darth Vader, and now they just outright deny Darth Vader is a part of Star Wars. Thank you for that analogy, Chris. I think that's a really good way of putting it. Go on, David.
Although I think that's a dangerous idea, because that's why some people say, well, but that is not veganism. Veganism is, the battle against suffering, for example. And that's why it's a dangerous position to take, because, well, they thought about it for 7 years and they came out with the official definition. And it wasn't just Leslie Cross. It was just like a small group of the most prominent members of the society, just getting together and talking about what they wanted to the word veganism to represent.
Right. But I guess the analogy here with what you're saying is what you're seeing today would be like fan fiction spin-offs of Star Wars. But I guess with Chris's analogy, what he's saying is there was just an early first kind of draft of veganism in like the early 40s or whenever it was, and then it got the vegan society refined what it means to be vegan, and then Darth Vader comes in and we have officially what veganism is. And this guy is saying Star Wars is not about Darth Vader because he wasn't included in the original draft. That's what I guess.
Yeah.
Also, go on.
I don't know if you know the story, but Donald Watson became a vegetarian after he saw like a pig in a farm that was, I think, his uncle's farm. Yeah. And they slaughtered the pig, and he was there to witness the whole thing, and he went vegetarian because of that. And so it's clear that Watson always had in mind that this was about ethics,
Yeah.
Like
this was absolutely his driving motivation. Yeah, absolutely. He didn't want he didn't want you just to eat a plant-based diet for the fun of it. He wants you to eat it and along with doing other things because he opposes animal abuse. He was horrified. It was a life-changing experience when he saw this pig murdered in front of him, his friend murdered in front of him on the farm.
In 1948, then, Watson stepped down as president of the Vegan Society. He was really kind of pressured out of there. And in 1950, Leslie Cross, who had gotten himself onto the committee, which is the board of directors of the society, basically pulled a coup. He took over the Vegan Society. He replaced all the board members with people who he wanted to put in there. He changed the definition of veganism so that it meant animal rights. And Watson, when he had retired, had been given a lifetime honorary title of honorary vice president. It carried no authority, but it was just to show how appreciative everybody was that he'd invented veganism and founded the society. Leslie Cross stripped that title away from Donald Watson in 1950. He just basically said, you know what, you're not the right type of vegan. You're not important. We're not going to honor you. Donald Watson never attended another event or meeting or anything having to do with the Vegan Society for 40 years until after Leslie Cross died. So Leslie Cross assumed control of the Vegan Society.
I'm not sure about what he said about this title, but I'm sure that could you go back, please? Just
like 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, just the last screen, like
50. He just basically said, you know what, you're not the right type of vegan. You're not important. We're not going to honor you. Donald Watson never attended another event or meeting or anything having to do with the Vegan Society for 40 years until after Leslie Cross died. So Leslie Cross assumed control of the Vegan Society in 1950 and he turned it into animal rights. He changed the definition. He started publishing articles about the horrors of, this animal and the horror.
Okay, so he's claiming that just before 1949, the Vegan Society and Watson was all about diets. And on the first, do you have the screenshot that I sent you? Like the first one.
Yeah, let me just have a look. Try and
they
find
talk
that.
about the white one with the, because they.
Do you know what it starts with? Can you just look at your?
Yeah, I think it starts with the editorial of the first vegan news.
Okay,
stated.
got it. Yeah, let me just. All right. Right. The editorial of the first vegan news stated, "We can see quite plainly that our present civilization is built upon the exploitation of animals, just as past civilizations were built upon the exploitation of slaves. This was an early hint that non-dairy vegetarianism was destined to be no more than one part of the general philosophy of the new movement." Shall I continue, David, or did you?
Yeah, maybe the part where they talk about the fourth issue, where it says.
Okay. Yeah, the fourth issue, August 1945, stated, "The object of the Vegan Society is to oppose the exploitation of sentient life, whether it is profitable to do so or not. This is a considerable widening of the original non-dairy motivation."
Yeah, because this guy, Jeff Nelson, claims that before Leslie Cross, there was no mention of anything about animal rights. And that's the proof that these guys, saying something incorrect or just plain lying, lying to other people just so he can save face.
Good shout. Right. Let's go back to my...
of that animal and so on. He brought in a new newsletter editor whose first article was that if you weren't a vegan for animal rights reasons, you weren't a vegan. The end result is that Leslie Cross drove the Vegan Society into a ditch. He drove it into the ground, really. In 1950, when Leslie Cross had assumed leadership of the Vegan Society, it had 600 paying members.
Also, they said, I don't remember the name of the document, but you can find all these documents on a site called candidhominid.com. And they said that they weren't too strict about who could join because they were expecting people to embrace the new idea, the new idea of veganism. But after that, they started to get like, okay, this is getting out of hand because everybody's talking about what is veganism, and everybody has like a personal opinion of what it is. And that's when they started, trying to come up with an official definition. So in 1949, Leslie Cross wrote this In Search of Veganism, which are two documents, part 1 and 2, and they were almost there. Like they knew what it has to encompass. That like the definition has to encompass these things and these things. And they had like a clear idea of what it was going to be in 1951.
Thank you, David. That's why I've got you on. Right.
By 1954, it had only 140. He was driving people off en masse. New people weren't joining. They couldn't keep the newsletter going. They had to reduce the number of pages and make an appeal to those few members that they had left to pay more money.
Also, this is kind of what happens with some groups in when you have a chapter of AV or a group of animal safe or something. This is also what happens when you notice that there are some people that are not there for the right reasons, or they are like they end if they let's say they are in a cube, and the cube ends and they go out and buy some ice cream or something, then obviously you have to get rid of those people. Those people shouldn't be there. I think that's pretty much what happens to the society, the vegan society at that time, and that is not a bad thing. That is a very good thing. Every social movement needs to start with the people who are convinced of opposing the injustice.
Yeah, he's basically appealing to popularity. He's like, oh my God, can you believe it? The Vegan Society had this many members who were just bringing up bullshit ideas, and then they left because of this. I mean, how awful. And it just remained to be, you know, the people who were truly in it for the animals. What a terrible shame it was that all these, you know, speciesists essentially left the Vegan Society. All right.
Money than their dues just to keep the newsletter going. In 1956, Leslie Cross stepped down from the Vegan Society to start a soy milk company, and the guy who replaced him did exactly in 1957 what Leslie Cross had done in 1950, which was bring in a group of his friends. This time they happened to be Watson-type vegans.
This is just a completely humorous point to interject, but I wonder how, I know there's some older vegans in the live chat, and I'm just laughing at the idea of soy milk in, well, anything, to be honest, even before the noughties. I just assume it was absolutely terrible. So, I mean, apparently, this guy I've done a lot of activism with, who's my old co-organiser in London, Mark Flood, shout out Mark if you're watching, he said some of the older vegans in the UK will remember this Plamil. Apparently there was this soy milk so any vegans watching who think veganism is, you know, hard or whatever today, and I don't like the alternative milks, back in the day you used to have to, there was these screw top soy milks, and it was like a powder, and you would mix it with water. So that's just the little humorous note I wanted to interject with. Be very thankful for what we have today, because I'm just imagining what this soy milk company that Leslie Cross set up in the 50s or whatever it was like.
And took over control.
Sorry,
David, go on.
And also the point about the bankruptcy. It's like he wants more money, and he is just worried about the vegan society having a lot of money, and I think that's the problem that it has today. And well, I don't want to criticize that. Well, I don't want to stray from the subject, but but that's a problem for many organizations, that they compromise the message just to get more donations and just to get more money.
Yeah, I just want to say, money in the movement is fantastic. I want animal rights groups to have tons of money. We do need to be well funded in order to defeat these well funded industries. But at the same time, if you're just selling your soul, then that's bad for veganism. You can't just basically cuck to money whenever it's just waved in front of you. You can't just you can't just sniff a £5 note in front of you or whatever it is, and then just start obeying every order that the person waving the money in front of you is telling you to do.
The word entirely removed any mention of animals or animal rights. It now became a diet and health organization. It rebounded, it started to become more stable, more people started joining, and they were able to restore all the pages to the newsletter. So it basically recovered. When you look at this page, when you read about what the UK Vegan Society is and what its history is, it's like a tennis match. It's one group of people over here seizing control of the organization, changing the definition of veganism. If it's the animal rights, if it's the cross vegans, they're driving it down into the ground, almost destroying the organization. Then the Watson vegans come in, they take over, they make it more welcoming, less strident, less judgmental.
I don't know if I'm about to articulate this point well enough, but hear me out. This is just a little thought bouncing around my head right now. It's like he's very arbitrarily assigning what veganism should be about just based on one small segment of what happened. He's saying that it's like a tennis match. He's saying it's going back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
So I think all he's saying here is what he wants veganism to be about. I don't think he's actually. I can't see here how he's actually made some kind of clear point as in this is what veganism was about, and then it was bastardized or whatever. He's saying it's like a tennis match. It's fighting between blah blah blah. Ultimately, it's who has the more logical arguments on their side as to what veganism is about, and that's why I stick to it. Doesn't matter, whether they fought over this and whether they fought over that. Veganism has to be about the animals because there are ways to eat animals without impacting your health. There are ways to exploit animals without impacting your health or the environment. So it has to just but there's no way to exploit animals without violating animal rights. So it just has to be about animal rights. It doesn't matter who had this tussle here and there. It's just like he's just arbitrarily saying one side of the tennis court is the right one and the other one is wrong because, well, that's what he doesn't want veganism to be about.
And also, well, the history of veganism that I have read from this Candid Hominid site that has all the. Sometimes they have the original papers as well. Is that in 1964, Cross defined veganism in 1951 as the doctrine that humans should live without exploiting animals. And, he went a little bit further in detail, like saying that veganism is not a set of practices, but a principle. And the principle is what defines veganism, and the practices that come that result from the holding that principle are not what define veganism. So it's that's very crucial to understand, because you cannot say that somebody who is plant-based because he's got a vegan girlfriend, that this person is vegan. He's just a guy that is doing something because he feels compelled not to piss off his girlfriend. But it's not that he holds that principle, and that's very crucial to understand from that definition. And then in 1964, that was the first official change that I know of, and it was very I should say, it was very suspicious, I would say, because just like 3 months after that, the Vegan Society becomes a registered charity. So they kind of toned down the definition of Leslie Cross, and they add veganism is a lifestyle. So it's the opposite of what I just said. Like they are defining veganism as a lifestyle, as a set of practices, and that's just before they become a registered charity, and they can get more donations. Yeah, if you water down the concept, it's easier to get more people behind it.
Cool.
Judgmental. Suddenly it starts to recover, more people join, and it thrives, and then the cross vegans start over. So, the definition is this way, then the definition is that way. The net result that you'll see is that the UK Vegan Society is basically irrelevant to veganism. It's like the Keystone Cops. They don't know how to appeal to people. And during the last few decades, even when veganism has been exploding, when there's been books, there's been products, there's vegan societies springing up everywhere, you find that the UK Vegan Society is once again going down, crashing, bankrupt, barely able to survive at a time when you would think they would be flourishing. The most important thing that I learned by reading through this is that the UK Vegan Society doesn't own the word vegan. The word vegan was created inside the UK Vegetarian Society. The Vegan Society, that came later, 6 months after Watson started his vegan group. So, you hear people saying you can't redefine veganism. Well, if that's true, then veganism is strictly a diet. It has, nothing to do with the animal rights that many people associate with it. That's a later thing. You look at all the different definitions, your head almost spins. Well, which definition do you want? Do you want the present preferred one, or do you want the one just before that, or maybe the one 3 back? Do you want the one where honey's vegan? Do you want any of the 8 definitions where honey is vegan, or do you want the 7 definitions where honey's not vegan? Let's take a look more in depth.
I think we should repeat what Watson said in 1945. Like the object of the vegan society was to end the exploitation of sentient life. That's it's obvious that the vegan society has always revolved around that concept. And this guy is just cherry picking just some. I think Watson wasn't too careful with words. Crossword was much more careful and much more thoughtful about what he said.
You're right, and that's what makes this guy even more. I don't want to get too personal, or whatever, but it's kind of a cheap shot that he's taken, because I think what you've just said there, David, is very true. I think there's plenty of vegans in the movement who are in it for the right reasons, but just aren't quite as articulate as other vegans, right? And it could well be the case that Watson was just one of those vegans. He was a really caring guy. His heart was in it. His life changed after he saw this pig murdered in front of him as a farm, and he wanted veganism to be about rejecting the exploitation of animals, but he just wasn't that good as Cross, for example, as just drilling that point home. And what this guy from VegSource is kind of doing is he's like capitalizing on just any like little
on the mistakes,
right? Any like to use. This is a speciesist term, so my apologies, but he's being like a little vulture kind of thing. He's just kind of like picking off
on that,
right? Yes. And he's just trying to capitalize on those little bits, basically. All right.
At how this thing exactly unfolded. There has always been interest in the Vegetarian Society of the UK in veganism. As early as 1905, you see people discussing it in the newsletter. In 1938, there was a flurry of articles. Then in 1942, a series of articles begins again. By 1944, Donald Watson goes to the UK Vegetarian Society and says, listen, you have a monthly newsletter. Would you give 1 page of your monthly newsletter for non-dairy, non-egg vegetarians, where we could share recipes and so on? And the UK Vegetarian Society said, no, we don't really want to do that, but I tell you what, why don't you start a group? We have lots of groups in the society. You start a non-dairy vegetarian group and we will promote it, and we will let you run a letter to get other vegetarians who are interested in doing that to go with you. So that's what Watson did. He put a letter. He had about 25 people to start. He put out the first newsletter in November of 1944, and he just invented the word vegan. He took the word vegetarian and shortened it and said, we'll use that until we come up with a better word. So in his very first newsletter, the very first issue, he called it the Vegan News, and he suggested that a vegan would be somebody who follows a non-dairy, non-egg vegetarian diet. In the second edition of Watson's Vegan News newsletter, he reports that there's been...
He says he suggested, and you see what he did? He suggested, and
right.
It's not exactly what he said, but in the first Vegan News, he said, well, the object of the vegan society is to end the exploitation of sentient life, whether it is profitable to do so or not. It's clear that Watson wasn't just interested in promoting diets because of human health.
You know, this might be a good opportunity for me to read something. Thank you again, Chris Hines, who's watching, because he drew me to this episode of Vegan Spring in 1946, where Watson was the editor. Let me just get this up on the screen, because this is significant.
Yeah.
Share screen.
When he talks about that humans don't have the right to use animals to serve their needs. I think that's the most important bit.
So this is, I don't know if this is written by Watson or if just Watson oversaw this article as the editor of this of this paper.
At the beginning of the articles, it says who wrote it.
Okay, let's have a look
Normally,
at that.
if you go one page.
Editorial, the case for veganism. That must be Watson. It says at the top, editor Donald Watson.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Watson who wrote this then, as far as we can see. It says, the acceptance of a reformed relationship between man and animals is imperative. The higher animals have feelings like ours, therefore they should have justice on equal terms with ourselves or not be bred into the world. So he opposes the breeding of animals. Until this demand is met, man will remain a thug species despite its pious creeds. So this is funny because this Jeff guy at VegSource is saying that Leslie Cross was this extremist and Watson was just this, kind of, live and let live, plant-based kind of thing. But there's Watson calling humans like a thug species for what we're doing to animals. Says, animals present us with a test case, and by our conduct to them in their innocence and weakness, our own standards are truly fixed. Admit that the strong have the right to exploit the weak, and the basis of civilized society is gone. The attitude is one of conceit and selfishness, and unless discarded, will not confine itself to the treatment of animals. Therefore, in man's interest, animal exploitation must end. Not only flesh food, here we go, but all products of the slaughterhouse must be denounced and the most serious effort made to avoid their use. So, I mean,
Also, could you maybe, are you going to use something more about this, something else about this?
I wasn't planning to, but if you want to draw attention to another part, let's read that.
Yeah, but I think that I sent you the screenshot just so that we don't have to look for it.
Okay, okay.
And it starts with Watson became the Vegan Society's first elected president in 1946.
Okay, let me find that. Okay, yep. So,
this is also very important to debunk what this guy is saying.
So, Watson became the Vegan Society's first elected president in 1946. The next year, he gave a speech at the 11th World Vegetarian Congress in Stonehouse, England. The following excerpts are from a report the Vegan Society printed as a pamphlet. Watson said, the vegan believed that if they were to be true emancipators of animals, they must renounce absolutely their traditional and conceited attitude that they had the right to use them to serve their needs. They must supply those needs by other means. Throughout history, whenever man has risen against cruelty and exploitation, he had benefited himself as well as those he had emancipated. That was the law of progress. Therefore, further advantages would follow if we seriously tackle those cruelties upon which civilization was still so largely built. If the vegan ideal of non-exploitation were generally adopted, it would be the greatest peaceful revolution ever known, abolishing vast industries and establishing new ones in the better interests of men and animals alike. Veganism would establish for the first time a right relationship between man and animals.
Yeah, we have to be careful with this because this is what some intersectionals use. The part where it says it would be the greatest peaceful revolution ever known.
Right.
That they want to misinterpret that as, well, Donald Watson wanted an intersectional movement, which is not really what is what is being said right there.
Right. Okay, just going to go back to the movie now.
And talk of creating a separate organization, a separate society, a vegan society. And in the newsletter, he proposes what could be the rule, what could be the definition that defines it. And he writes, it is proposed that the vegan society shall have but one rule as follows. I desire to be enrolled as a member of the Vegan Society, and during my period of membership, I promise not to partake of fish, flesh, fowl, eggs, animal's milk, or any of its products, and also that I will not consciously use foods if any of the above are included. In their place, I will use the wholesome products of the vegetable kingdom. This was just a proposal by Watson. This was not adopted formally because there was no Vegan Society yet to adopt it. That happened later. But the important thing to note is that Watson is saying in his proposed rule here that the Vegan Society is simply about a vegan diet. That's it. So now on April 8th, 1940.
Also, I want to point out that this speech by Watson is a bit stronger than even the definition by Cross, because it says that man has no right to use other animals for his needs.
Yeah.
Well, I lost it, but yeah, that's the let me see. Yeah, they must renounce absolutely their traditional and conceited attitude that they had the right to use them to serve their needs. You know, he's talking about vegans if they want to be the true emancipators.
Right.
That's a bit stronger than just the doctrine that man should live without exploiting animals.
Yeah.
So even that affirmation, that statement by Watson is a bit stronger than the official definition.
A provisional committee met to discuss forming the Vegan Society. This is the first time that the group of people had met to discuss this, and they set up some committees. They appointed different roles for different people. And out of this meeting came what has come to be known as Watson's Manifesto on Veganism. And here's what the manifesto said. It began, aims of the Vegan Society are, 1, to advocate that man's food should be derived from fruits, nuts, vegetables, grains, and other wholesome non-animal products, and that it should exclude flesh, fish, eggs, fowl, honey, and animal's milk, butter, and cheese. Number 2, to encourage the manufacture and use of alternatives to animal commodities. So at the same time, vegan groups were springing up in California, in India, and in Germany, also dedicated to the vegan diet. In the next vegan newsletter that Watson put out, he put a masthead with 3 points defining veganism. And in fact, this is the same masthead he used from then on in the newsletter. And it read like this: veganism is the practice of living on fruits, nuts, vegetables, grains, and other wholesome non-animal products. Veganism excludes as human food flesh, fish, fowl, eggs, honey, and animal's milk, butter, and cheese. Veganism aims at encouraging the manufacture and use of alternatives to animal products.
I just want to say one thing that might be happening here. Not only, as you mentioned, David, was Watson perhaps not as good as articulating certain things or as including in the message what he kind of should have been saying, which is where Cross kind of came along and refined stuff. But it could have genuinely been the case at that time in 1940s England that for many people, including many vegans, there weren't alternatives to wearing animal skins. It could well be the case that in the 40s, I don't know, I didn't live in the 40s, but from what I gather, while you could definitely eat a plant-based diet in the 40s, though again it'd be harder than it is now and blah blah blah, clothing wise, I don't know if they had like viscose and synthetic jumpers and stuff to keep warm in the winter. They probably would have just worn wool. I don't know if it would have probably been extremely hard to find yourself some synthetic non-leather shoes. And I think this could be part of what was kind of happening here. I think Watson ultimately he clearly didn't want animals to be exploited or murdered for any reason, but he might have just stringently here applied certain rules because, well, at that time, there was kind of no way around stuff. So he just had to make it very clear that it's like, look, you cannot eat anything that comes from an animal, but I'm not going to turn you away because you didn't want to walk barefoot in the snow to the Vegan Society meeting because literally all that's in the shops is cow flesh shoes. I don't know.
Well, it was like Second World War, the times of the Second World War. So it was very hard for them to promote veganism at that time. So
Yeah.
we have to also bear in mind that the main concern of people, well, it well, it presumably it still is, but the main concern of people going vegan or adopting a plant-based diet at that time, as a result of holding the vegan principle, was
Mhm.
that they were going to get sick or they were going to die, and and some of them even did because of lack of B12 in the 60s. But that's another story, because at that time they didn't have any knowledge about that. But these guys cherry picking here, because in the third edition, this issue also said what you just what you read at the beginning, like uh, that this small group of non-dairy vegetarians should work for the abolition not only for all food of animal origin, but also of commodities made from animal products, in particular those from their slaughterhouse. So that was also in that issue that he is citing there. So he's cherry picking. He's cherry picking what uh, helps him make his claim that Watson just wanted veganism to be just a plant-based diet.
Yeah, and Chris Hines is in the comments and saying, read the bit below the bit he's highlighting. Although I'm not sure I've got the right bit. But yeah, if anyone knows, is Chris on about this bit that's on the screen now? Because I don't think that I'm most anxious that this debate should bring about this whole thing follows, whatever. But yeah, I'll continue playing the video. And tell you what, Chris, if you can just copy and paste or quote whatever it is in the live stream here, what it is that he's fundamentally missing out here, or whenever it was, that would be helpful. But I'll continue on playing the video.
In the same newsletter above, in May of 1945, Watson says what essentially it takes.
Did you want to say something, David?
Yeah, that Chris just wrote that was a while back, so maybe we just missed it.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So yeah, cool.
To be a member of the Vegan Society. And he writes, it is particularly important that no one signs for full membership, that is in the society, unless he or she intends to be absolutely strict at all times. And he goes on to say, strictness implies that no foods containing milk, eggs, butter, cheese, or honey are allowed. Watson also added that the society should...
Go on.
No.
I thought you were making a hand gesture. Sorry, David.
Work for the abolition not only for all food of animal origin, but also of commodities made from animal products, in particular, those from the slaughterhouse. So this was the exact same position that the UK Vegetarian Society had had for more than 100 years before veganism came on the scene. Many people think, oh, veganism is about also avoiding leather and so on, but no, that had already existed. That wasn't particularly vegan, that was much more vegetarian. You can go back and look at the Vegetarian Society newsletter from 1851, and there's an ad for shoes, non-leather shoes. In 1904, there's an ad for a vegetarian jeweler whose products contain no bone, no ivory, and no leather. So it wasn't particularly vegan, as I say, it was...
Now he's contradicting himself, because he's... At the beginning of the documentary, he says that it didn't have anything to do with animal rights. So what does leather have to do with diets?
And then Chris, thank you, Chris, for just filling us in on that point. On the Emancipation Proclamation below the bit highlighted, it says, the Vegan Society seeks to abolish man's dependence on animals with its inevitable cruelty and slaughter. So yeah, this was a bit that he's just, once again, he's cherry picked so hard here, just because he obviously, this guy who runs VegSource, it's very clear what his agenda is here. He wants to be able to just eat a plant-based diet for his health reasons without having to worry about all this other stuff in his life because he obviously just doesn't care about the animal rights message, or at least not to the extent
And
that we do.
He and his daughters were just prominent YouTubers at the time, and they wanted their channels to grow more. And the daughters were writing books on diets, so they had some other motivations, in my opinion.
Right.
As a tradition that began in the Vegetarian Society, and essentially Watson used the Vegetarian Society as a template. He did exactly what they did, with the only change being it wasn't a vegetarian diet, it was a vegetarian diet with no dairy and no eggs in it. So otherwise, the encouraging people to avoid non-food animal products, that was exactly the same position of the Vegetarian Society. And of course, if you were a vegetarian in the UK...
Go ahead.
That's also not true, because there's some evidence that they tried to create a new branch of non-dairy vegetarians, and the Vegan Society said no. So that's completely untrue. And that's also on the site Candid Hominid. If you want to read the history of the movement, it's clearly stated there, and there are some documents that prove that.
Awesome.
Vegetarian Society, and you did wear leather, you were still a vegetarian. In the same way, if you were a vegan in the UK Vegan Society and you wore leather, you were still a vegan. Watson was just continuing the same policy as the UK Vegetarian Society, and he was still very active in it. He was still the secretary of the Vegetarian Society of Leicester.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that point I made like 3 minutes ago. It may even be true that Watson was not the type of person at the time to say you're not vegan because they were wearing cowskin shoes, because the availability of synthetic shoes was probably so low at that time, it's just not something that you could really afford to do. So again, I just want to reiterate that point of just how much more practically convenient it is to be able to live without any forms of animal exploitation in this day and age. Unfortunately, in the 1940s, it just was tougher in many areas. Like food was a comparatively easy thing to the other things, but clothing, it just might not have been a thing that most people could skirt around. I mean, he even mentioned here there's newspaper clippings. We sell vegetarian shoes or something. That might have been like the only one in the country or something. You might have had to drive 4 hours or something to get yourself this. Go on, David.
And also they were worried about medicines.
Mm-hmm.
That some of the medicines were tested on animals, and so they had these problems to work around, and that's one of the reasons why they changed the definition to as far as practicable and possible. That was in the 1970s.
Right.
Where he lived. So Watson, in essence, said if you eat a vegetarian diet, you're a vegetarian. If you eat a vegan diet, you're a vegan. Then in 1946, they established more formally the Vegan Society, and they had a constitution and they had rules. And here are the rules. The word vegan has been brought into use since the formation of the Vegan Society, and it denotes a person who abstains from using animal products as food. Veganism is actually vegetarianism carried logically to a further stage. The Vegan Society has been formed to coordinate and assist these pioneers in their efforts. It has a threefold aim. Number one, to advocate that man's food should be derived from fruits, nuts, vegetables, grains, and other wholesome non-animal products, and that it should exclude flesh, fish, fowl, eggs, honey, animals, milk.
Oh, another point I want to make. Watson may well have thought, just due to the lack of stuff like, I don't know, YouTube and all that kind of stuff like that, he may well have thought that all these things like wool, leather, blah, 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 that these were just kind of byproducts. He was probably against animals being used for any purpose. But the point is, he's focusing so much on the food thing, because what he's saying there is, if we abolish the lamb industry, the wool industry falls. So this is the thing we have to focus on. Now, in this day and age, we know that that's not the case. We know that wool is actually a co-product, not a byproduct of the lamb meat industry. That means, let's say, tomorrow all lamb in the world became poisonous to eat. Someone made a magic wand and every single bit of lamb meat in the world became poisonous to eat. Lambs would still be farmed for their wool. The enslavement of lambs would not end. It may have not been so clear in the 40s that these things weren't byproducts. People might have seen these things now in the same way as we see, like, I don't know, parts of like car tires or stuff like that. They might not have really realized in some senses. But I think it could still be the case that Watson did realize, but maybe didn't articulate things as well. Go on, David.
Yeah, I saw a video of Nina and Randa, these guys' daughters, and it was like watching like Piers Morgan, like repeating all these gray areas and all these problems that vegans might encounter with what you just said, like bike tires or almond milk and all this. It was like Piers Morgan bases his refuttals and rebuttals on these girls' video from like 7 years ago. I think it's called the honey debate, because they were just trying to defend themselves from all the critic, from all the critics that said that they were not vegan.
Yeah.
Butter and cheese. Number 2, to encourage the production and use of alternatives to animal commodities. Number 3, to extend and organize veganism nationally and internationally, and to facilitate contacts between those following the vegan way of life. And you can see this little image that was published with it, where it says the Vegan Society advocates that man's food should be derived from nuts, fruits, vegetables, and grains, and encourages the use of alternatives to all products of animal origin. Probably the most important difference between how Watson invented veganism and how some people interpret veganism today is that you were encouraged to avoid non-food animal products, but you weren't required. It didn't mean you weren't vegan if you wore eyeshadow that had some animal product in it, or you wore leather shoes or whatever. So Watson was vegan for animal concerns and the treatment of animals. He thought meat was cruel, and he also thought dairy and eggs were cruel. So that was his main overarching motivating factor for becoming vegan. He was also a health vegan, and in the very first newsletter he wrote about how he went vegan and then was able to ride 230 miles in a day on his bicycle, whereas before he was vegan, he could barely do half that. So he was very much into health. And his primary partner, Dugald Semple, who was vice president of the Vegetarian Society and also president of the Scottish Vegetarian Society, he was a health vegan. He had gone vegan, or it wasn't called that, of course. In 1905, he'd written a book. He'd toured England discussing the vegan diet. So these guys are very seriously into the health aspects of veganism. Most of the articles in the newsletter, while Donald Watson was involved, were about food and were about health and about minerals. So in 1946, this guy, Leslie J. Cross, it's a man, Leslie Cross, joined as a member of the Vegan Society. And he was this extremist animal rights fellow, very strident. He'd actually written a letter in the Vegetarian Society about non-dairy vegetarianism. I was going to say veganism. Right. He actually wrote a letter in the Vegetarian.
So the devil, Leslie Cross, is now joining. Go on, David.
Yeah, well, I wonder why, or I know why, but this guy saying that that Cross was strident. Well, what is his claim based on? Like, and if you read the letters. At that time, they were very diplomatic. They weren't just YouTubers just swearing all the time, like it could happen today. But it's
Vegetarian Messenger a few years earlier, which is the Vegetarian newsletter, about it, and he wrote a very sort of angry letter about how non-dairy vegetarians weren't getting respect from other vegetarians, even though they'd taken sort of a superior diet, a better, less cruel diet. So he joined, and he had this idea that Watson should make the Vegan Society an animal rights organization, that it should be about hunting, anti-vivisection, anti-horseback riding, anti-fishing, anti-circuses, and that sort of thing. And Watson and the other founders, that's not what they had in mind. They basically wanted a vegetarians association that was about the vegan diet and not an organization to go attack a whole host of animal issues. In 1948, Watson stepped down as president of the Vegan Society rather abruptly and unexpectedly. And historians have looked at it and they think that some of the friction between Cross trying to cajole him and urge him to make an animal rights association is the reason that he stepped down. And he stepped down at the annual general meeting. This is a once-a-year meeting of the Vegan Society. When he stepped down, the members voted to give an honorary title to Watson, make him an honorary vice president for life. And this was to recognize his immense contribution in inventing veganism and in starting the Vegan Society. And in fact, they gave this same title and this same honor.
Will he stop saying inventing veganism? Because even by this guy's own logic, even assuming that Watson just intended veganism never to be fully about animal rights, it's just a plant-based diet. People had been eating plant-based diets for thousands of years in various cultures all over the world for non-animal rights reasons, spiritual reasons, blah, blah, blah. So especially, in fact, if Watson just intended it to be this plant-based bullshit movement, he especially didn't invent veganism. It's just people have just all over the world had been doing this for thousands of years.
Honor to all of the founders along with Watson who had done it. So again, it was symbolic, it didn't carry any power or authority, but it meant that he was a bigwig, he was an important person at the Vegan Society. At that same meeting in 1948, Leslie Cross was elected to the committee. The committee is the board of directors of the Vegan Society, so he became one of the members of the board of directors of the Vegan Society. In 1949, Leslie Cross wrote a couple of articles in the Vegan Society newsletter, and in these articles he tried to argue that veganism should be about animal rights and that the Vegan Society should become an animal rights organization. And the members, he must have gotten some pushback because in the second article, he starts it off with sort of a disclaimer that, hey, this is not official policy. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Vegan Society. These are just my own ideas. And he goes through and lists that he believes animal rights issues are really what the organization should be about. You need to go through and read this portion of the page because it's really fascinating how this guy Leslie Cross worked. It's kind of disgusting. It's kind of slimy. It's dishonest. He went in and he made the point, he asserted that, you know what, there's no definition of veganism. Geez, we've never really formally defined veganism. And so we should probably make it animal rights. So this idea that Watson had created veganism, had definitions on the front of every newsletter, and now Cross was trying to convince people that we don't really know what it is, we don't really have a definition. And even the modern day Vegan Society, if you go look at their website, they continue this lie. They say that, oh, in 1949, Leslie Cross discovered that there was no actual definition for veganism, and he proposed animal rights. It was true that animal rights activists had tried to capture the Vegetarian Society, the UK.
And what he says there, I have the document here. What he says there is that the fact that the society has reached its present position without having defined in any precise way the light it attempts to reflect need not disturb us. There were good, if perhaps unrecognized, reasons why the definition should not be attempted until the society reached a certain point along its road. What, however, must give us food for thought is the growing feeling that such a point is now not far off, that the limited period during which lack of definition is useful and desirable is approaching exhaustion, which is what I tried to say at the beginning of the live stream.
Yeah,
that they were trying to gather some people to see if the concept could get through them.
Vegetarian Society and different vegetarian societies around England They wanted to go in and not just have them be about the vegetarian diet, but have them be about animal rights. And generally, they had failed. But with the Vegan Society, Leslie Cross had a new, fast-growing group, and he pulled a coup in 1950. In 1950, he went to the annual general meeting, and he brought a bunch of friends who had just joined the Vegan Society, animal rights friends, and they had a supermajority. So when things came up for a vote, he won, and he proposed a new constitution for the Vegan Society. His friends voted, and he got the new constitution. In the new constitution, he redefined veganism. He gave it a new meaning. He refocused what the purpose of the Vegan Society was, and he stripped away the honorary title from Donald Watson and from the other founders. Now remember, this was like a life appointment.
It wasn't like if it had been improvised, like what I just read was from 1949. So it was like if what this guy says is true, then they had been like a year planning this or something like that. But it seems like far-fetched, you know.
Yeah.
To show gratitude to these people for what they'd contributed, all the time that they'd put in and all the ideas to veganism. He took that away from those people. I can only see that he was, trying to make a very strong statement that, veganism is about animal rights. You guys refuse to make it about animal rights. You're not real vegans. You're not appreciated. Your contribution is really nothing. That's why we're stripping away your honorary titles. And, I'm running things now, guys. What an asshole. So here's the new definition that Leslie Cross gave to veganism in 1950. The object of the society shall be to end the exploitation of animals by man. The word veganism shall mean the doctrine that man should live without exploiting animals. The society pledges itself in pursuance of its object to seek to end the use of animals by man for food, commodities, work, hunting, vivisection, and all other uses involving exploitation of animal life by man. And Leslie Cross even wrote that this change was, quote, a considerable widening of the original non-dairy motivation of the society. So basically, he took over the society and he changed it.
But that is basically what Watson said in all the papers that we just showed. So, he's claiming that Cross is changing everything, and Watson had the same idea.
Why do you think he's saying this about Watson, and what do you think he's doing here?
Well, I think he's trying to say that if like any other vegan, like modern vegan, should be well, he's trying to sell more books, in my opinion. That's my take on it, and to become more relevant in the YouTube community. But
so he's trying to be kind of controversial and take a wrecking ball to the history of like the foundations of veganism and kind of speak over Donald Watson and his intentions in a way, just to rile some.
Yeah, he's trying to grow the plant-based community, and that they feel great saying that they are vegan, and that nobody can tell them that that they are not, even if they are wearing leather or whatever. It's just a way of promoting all these. At the time, back in those days, well, it's not that far behind in history, but back in those days, the huge channels were like Freely and Duran Rider and all these fruitarian guys, all these fruitarian people. There was some girls also. All these plant-based people just promoting diets, and they were doing great at the time. And this was very detrimental to the movement, because after a few years of people just going fruitarian, we started to see like a huge amount of videos that I'm no longer vegan because my health suffered, blah blah blah. All these team chief kind of stuff. that the people were no longer able to sustain their fruitarian diets. And these guys were the ones creating all these ex-vegans that we have seen in the past like 6 years.
Yeah.
He turned it into a different society than Watson had. He drove Watson out. He replaced everyone on the board with new people. So there was a big reshuffling. All the original people that had different jobs, they were gone. He put in new people. The guy who was editing the newsletter, he left because he'd been a friend of Watson, and he was disgusted. And he put himself in charge. He became the executive director, the executive vice president of the Vegan Society. So he took the Vegan Society in an animal rights direction. Now the articles became about the horrors of the way animals are treated in the world. It took on a sort of preachy tone. And for the first time, the Vegan Society started to have bad relationships with the Vegetarian Society, largely because Leslie...
I just want to say, it's a real shame none of these people are alive today to defend themselves. And I'm going to be consistent here. I mean, including, even if me and David have made any points that are wrong in this stream, and we've spoken over them in any way. It's just such a shame that these people who were so instrumental in founding the Vegan Society, there's all this debate going on about what it was, what they meant, and they're all dead. And it's so, yeah. And we're at that point in time where it's like so close but so far. I mean, in 100 years' time, these people are going to be like ancient. These people are like, flipping, I don't know if you're in your 30s or something like me. These people are our grandparents or great-grandparents age kind of thing. They only recently kind of died. I think Watson died in like 2005. I think my own grandparents died in like 2001. It's just like we're just on the tip of ever sort of knowing them, if that makes sense. Not that there's vegans in the chat who weren't vegan at the time that they were alive and so on.
Yeah, also the person that is alive that might have some information about this, but that he just doesn't want to create controversy is John Cross.
Roger Yates mentioned him in the chat. He said he'd tear this guy to shreds if he was watching. What is it then, David, that you think John Cross, Leslie Cross's son, would say?
He said in an interview with a Chilean girl that I used to know, he says in that interview that his father felt betrayed, and that he was fed up, and he left the society, and he was all the time like feeling like he wasn't he wasn't recognized by what he did, and that people try to just silence him. So And
Cross was disgusted that the Vegetarian Society allowed dairy, and so he didn't really want to cooperate, and it made for a difficult time between the two organizations. Whereas before, when Watson was involved, the vegetarian organizations were all helping contribute members and helping promote and report on the vegan movement. That all changed under Cross. Cross also brought in a new editor who is new to veganism, and he kind of taught him what veganism is about. And the first article that the editor wrote for the magazine stated that if you were not vegan for animal rights reasons, then you were not actually a vegan. And most people who were vegan for health reasons, like mostly people in America,
also, I just remember also another thing that John Cross said, that it was the opposite of what this guy is saying. Like Watson wanted to be in the limelight. He wanted to be always like the face of the organization, and Cross always was happy to be in the background. But that's what John says.
Right.
And
they weren't vegans at all. They were hygienists or they were something else, but they weren't vegan because they weren't doing for animal rights. There was another article that went in that claimed that Leslie Cross had basically hatched the idea for the Vegan Society, that Watson had taken it or been inspired, but that Leslie Cross was the one who deserved all the credit for the vegan society existing. So that was sort of an exercise in narcissism for Leslie Cross to put out an article saying that he deserved all the credit for the vegan society. It's you know, you can read the article, it's shocking. So how did the members...
Roger is saying something here that I think it's worth mentioning, that John claims that he remembers his dad, and Arthur Link was a personal friend of Watson and Cross, and coming up with the word vegan at their kitchen table. So John claims that Cross and Arthur Link came up with the word vegan.
That's interesting. That is very interesting. Because that's very different from what we are kind of told about the original. I think, as far as I knew, it was always Donald and possibly Dorothy Watson.
Yeah, exactly.
So Leslie Cross's own son is that it was actually his own dad, Leslie Cross, and this Arthur Ling who came up with the term. Anyway.
How did people react to this new direction and to Leslie Cross taking over? They left en masse. The society had 600 members in 1950 when Leslie Cross took over. By 1954, they only had 140 members. They had to shorten the newsletter, remove pages, and in fact, they couldn't continue with the newsletter without raising more money out of the remaining members, and they put appeals in the newsletter.
Okay, so what he's doing here is, I guess, could be a fallacy of what's known as correlation without causation. He's just correlating the people leaving the vegan society with Cross being the head of it. He said they're paying members as well. This could be to do with it could be to do with a price increase. It could be to do with they weren't getting as much bang for their buck anymore with stuff they receive in the post or something like that. It could be they didn't like something about the new recipes that were in the vegan newsletters or something they were getting. What this guy's doing here is just saying, Leslie Cross took over and everyone left because everyone hates Leslie Cross, the devil, because he made it about animal rights. Now, I'm not saying this wasn't the case. Again, it could just be that a load of plant-based people left in droves. I don't know. Because Cross was more stringent in articulating what veganism was actually about. And indeed, what, as we've learned already, what Watson always wanted veganism to be about. But he's still making this correlation without causation thing. People leave things all the bloody time. People leave clubs and societies for various reasons, especially if money's involved.
And I don't think that's particularly a bad thing to happen. It's like, I don't know if you remember. Well, I think you remember very well. But for example, in AV they had like more than 1,000 groups. And then there was some sort of cleanup because some of the groups were led by some people with ideas that weren't aligned with the organization. So and I think it was a good thing to happen. I don't think it was bad to happen.
Yeah, it was always. Yeah, I think when it comes to specifically organisations, it can be a good thing to happen. Obviously, we want there to be more vegans. We don't want to say, oh, it's good that more people are leaving veganism or anything like that. That's not the point we're making. But what we're saying here is we would rather have a load of people in an organisation who are we would rather have fewer people in an organisation who are actually abiding by its values than a shitload of people who are just doing whatever the hell they want. That's not what it's about. We want a dedicated core. We'd rather take a dedicated core team than just a load of people who aren't even living by the principles of whatever it is anyway.
Yeah. Do you remember any case of? Because I don't remember any case, but that people were just maybe welfareist or being too lenient with animals, with animal exploitation, and they were the organizers. And because I remember some cases like that, but not anyone in particular. And we don't need to name the person, but we might give some example of what we are talking about. Like yeah, for example, if an organizer for an AV chapter says that, well, it's okay to, it's okay to, I don't know, like test on animals for, I don't know.
Yeah, or eat eggs every Wednesday or something like that. Yeah, you would rather that person
exactly.
was just not in the organisation rather than there just because, oh, we want more people on board. No, it's like, no, we want people who are actually living by the actual principles of it. Anyway.
Exactly. Thank you.
To please make more contributions so we don't have to stop the newsletter. Leslie Cross left the Vegan Society in 1956 to go off and start a soy milk company. At that point, the Vegan Society was just barely on life support, limping along. And John Herron, who had been the newsletter editor that he had brought in, who wrote all these animal rights articles, had taken a trip to the United States and had seen vegan societies here, and he was blown away by what he saw, that there were so many vegans in the United States, and they were all largely health vegans. Although some, people had concern about animals, but they were all focused on health. He came back from this trip and started writing articles in the newsletter saying, wow, it's not enough to be vegan for animals, you must be vegan for health, because health is the best argument for the vegan diet. And when Leslie Cross left in 1956, John Herron, the new president, he became president, he did the exact same thing that Leslie Cross had done in 1950. He called a meeting of the members. He brought his friends in, who by then were like the Watson-type vegans, and he took over the organization. A new constitution, a new definition of veganism. He totally stripped out any mention of animals or animal rights. Here is the new definition of veganism for 1957.
I think we can safely say that health is not the best argument for vegan advocacy ever. We have seen the studies of all the people that say that they come back to exploiting animals, and most of them, the motivation they had was for health reasons. Like they went plant-based for health reasons, and at the minor inconveniences that they ended up exploiting animals again.
Yep, people who aren't binded by the actual moral message will always find a way to go back. They'll always find a way to start abusing animals for food again. What what are people going to do? Let's say someone goes, vegan for the environment. Then what happens the 1 minute when the beef industry brings out those pellets that are going to remove methane from cow farts? That they're probably going to bring these out in our lifetime. We may well see that methane emissions are eliminated in the beef and dairy industry because they have these pellets that they can feed cows that just neutralize their farts. Now, what's an environmental vegan? What's stopping an environmental vegan from eating a steak? As soon as that happens, or a health vegan from eating bacon, as soon as scientists find a way to remove cholesterol and saturated fat from bacon, but make it taste exactly the same, so it's just complete bullshit.
Yeah.
Veganism is the practice of living on the products of the plant kingdom to the exclusion of all animal foods, proceeding from a wide consideration of man's place in nature. The objects of the Vegan Society are to provide in thought and practice for the advancement of veganism and to relate veganism to every aspect of creative cooperation between man and nature. John Herron gave a talk later in 1957 as the president of the Vegan Society, and the talk was for the International Vegetarian Union Congress in India. And this was for all the different vegetarian and vegan societies to get together. There's a link to read the full talk. The first words of his talk are, veganism is the practice of living on the products of the plant kingdom to the exclusion of flesh, fish, fowl, eggs, animal milk, and its derivatives. So in other words, Herron was telling, as the president of the Vegan Society, the rest of the vegan and vegetarian world that the society's position was that veganism is a diet. And if you look at the rest of his speech, you can see that it's about veganism as a diet. There's no mention of honey. There's no mention of leather, of silk, of fur, or zoos or circuses or animal testing or vivisection or hunting or horseback riding or any of the issues that Leslie Cross was writing about from 1950 to 1956. It's gone completely over to food and health at that point. So what was the result of John Herron removing animal rights? Well, the organization recovered. It stabilized again. Membership began to
recovered. Like, you notice the the positive language that he's using here to talk about Watson's principles, again, that he's sweeping over, being screwed over by whoever this asshole was who took over the Vegan Society after Cross, if indeed this did actually happen, and this guy isn't just talking out of his ass. But it recovered. It was great. This guy took over, scrapped anything to do with animal abuse from the meaning, and just made it about selfish reasons. And the Vegan Society was great again. I mean, listen to this guy.
And that's the beginning of the chaos we have today. Like, if you read this paper from 1956, I think it's total crap. I would say.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning of the chaos we have with all these people wanting to water down the concept of animal consideration, more consideration for animals.
Yeah,
to grow. His articles were about food and about health. And when you read this website, you're going to see the history of the Vegan Society, and it's really not very pretty. It's kind of incompetent. It's like Keystone Cops. It's one group of people coming in, seizing the organization and taking it in their direction, and the other group coming in, taking it in that direction. Whenever the animal rights vegans get in charge, they drive membership down, they drive people off. It's almost bankrupt. Then the Watson-type vegans come in. It becomes friendlier, less judgmental, more open, more about food, more about diet, and membership goes up and money comes in. It makes you understand why veganism is really marginalized under these guys. All of the infighting. There's even fist fights in the Vegan Society. And during the 1990s, there was a company that had the Vegan Society approved label or sticker on their products. And this company had a problem with rodents. It had rats or mice infesting its factories. And the health department there in England came in and said, you must get rid of these rats or we're going to shut down your organization. We're going to shut down your business. So they had no choice. They brought in the pest control people. Well, at that year's meeting of the Vegan Society, the annual general meeting, there was a number of vegans who were up in arms about that. And they said, we are going to strip away the vegan approved seal and sticker that this company has because they killed these defenseless creatures, these little rats, and they're no longer vegan, so we're going to remove that. Most of the rest of the vegans thought, well, they had to do it. They had no choice. I don't think we should. But the vegans who thought they should started fighting, and it became physical. And the police were called to break it up and had to remain in the meeting so that they wouldn't break into, physical violence. These are the wonderful, peaceful, compassionate vegans, right? The irony in this story is that the company
that statement about these are the wonderful, peaceful, compassionate, I think it's so wrong. It's like if they are abusing someone just because of their skin color, and there are some people defending them, defending that person with maybe with violence, nobody would dare to say, nobody would dare saying like, oh, these are the peaceful, compassionate, anti-racist people. It's just so stupid. And also that maybe they could find a way around not killing these animals that were in the fabric in the place that he's talking about. But because there are just non-lethal traps for rats. Maybe they were trying to do something about that without killing the rats, but
that's what they'd have probably been trying to do, and perhaps they failed at doing so. And in any case, it was illegal. It was a legal order that they had to kill them, and they had to abide by these industry standards. Yeah. This is all just a massive aside, anyway. I think
exactly.
He's going
on a bit of a to do with cross.
Yeah, it's just going on a bit of a tangent here. So
that had the rats and that had to call in the exterminator was none other than Leslie Cross's soy milk company. And so they were the vegan company, but Leslie Cross was dead by then. But it was just ironic that a lot of Cross vegans wanted to strip his Vegan Society approved sticker away because his company had been forced to kill some rats in order to stay in business. So can you imagine if Leslie Cross's soy milk company had decided to close the company rather than kill the rats in the factories, if they just decided, oh, we have to go out of business because we can't harm these defenseless little creatures here? That would mean that today, the Play Milk, I think it's called Play Mill, it's an English company, soy milk company would not be in business. This huge soy milk company that's super successful and helped many people.
This is the argument that these so-called threshold deontologists like to use. Like, okay, like let's support lab-grown meat because, well, we might exploit and kill some animals, but then the benefits will be great for millions of animals. And I hate that. I hate this position that, like, okay, it was okay to not exhaust all the resources just because the benefits of having a plant-based milk around would be greater. And I don't even think that veganism should depend on options, because if those guys were able to be vegan in the 1940s, everybody should be able to do it without any soy milk or almond milk.
Yeah, exactly. These aren't basic needs. Just as a trivial aside there, so he's just talked about Plamil, which I mentioned earlier, which is what the older vegans were telling me about back in the day, was the screw top was the powder that you add water to. So he said that was set up by Cross. So that was Leslie Cross's company. Dear God. It's now called Plamil. I'm just reading about it on Wikipedia here. But when Cross founded it, it was
called Plant Milk.
Yes, the company began life in 1956 as the Plant Milk Society, which was set up by Leslie Cross. There you go. All right, carrying on.
Yeah.
Transition and become vegan would not exist in order to save those few rats. But you can see this is kind of the vegan society thinking, is like focused on minutia rather than the big picture, focused on some crazies rather than, normal people and how people live in this world. Now, the website talks about how Watson was absent from the vegan society for 40 years. He was actually pretty much absent the rest of his life. From 1948, when he stepped down, he never had any involvement. In 1965,
this guy calls minutia trying to defend animal rights, because that's what this is about. If we can protect the rights of a few individuals, that's what we should do. That's why the vegan position is deontic. It has to do with deontology. It has to do with protecting the rights of the individuals. If the rights of the individuals depend on any problem that might arise, then those are not rights at all.
It was the only time he appeared in the newsletter, when they were doing an anniversary issue about the founding, and they contacted him and asked him for some information about the founding of the Vegan Society. And it's funny that in the very next issue, after Donald Watson wrote about the founding, the next issue, Leslie Cross wrote an article in which he said, Watson got the idea from me. I was one of the founders, and he could not let Watson say something without his piping in and saying, no, me. I'm the one who should be credited with this more than Watson. Except, of course, it wasn't true. He wasn't even there. He wasn't even involved in the organization for the first 2 years. People have seen Watson as an older guy in his 90s and said he kind of became this grandfatherly face of the Vegan Society. Oh, it's Watson, the guy who founded it. Oh, it's the guy who has all these principles that I'm following and so on. Except he's not. You're following Leslie Cross, most likely. You're not following Donald Watson. The way Watson became involved, very briefly again, with the Vegan Society is that in 1988, after Leslie Cross had died in 1979. Leslie Cross died at age 65 in 1979. He was an AR vegan. He wasn't really a health vegan, whereas Watson lived to 95 and robust.
Do you have the screenshot that I sent you about the death of Leslie Cross?
And Watson speaking about it.
No, it was John, his son. His son was saying that he had
Oh,
like an
yes.
injury, like an
Okay.
injury.
Hello, does anyone know what Leslie Cross died? Okay, yeah, let me
Yeah,
get that up on the screen right now.
because
Stop
this
screen.
guy is claiming that Leslie Cross died early because he wasn't a healthy vegan. He wasn't a vegan for health.
Yeah,
And
that's kind of a cheap shot to make.
yeah,
Right.
very true.
Tegan said,
And
hello. So this is on a forum somewhere,
yeah,
and it's about Leslie Cross, and John Cross, Leslie Cross's son, actually replies. So someone says, hello, does anyone know what Leslie Cross died of? I tried Googling it, but cannot find a cause of death or even a consistent consensus on the age of death. Then John Cross replies, my father died from heart failure in his sleep due to prolonged use of barbiturates. He was an insomniac, and the meds prescribed then was barbiturates. A childhood injury left damage to his spine, which caused the insomnia.
yeah.
So, yeah, a pretty cheap shot from this guy in the
Yeah, very
documentary.
kind of shady. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, Skip,
Go on.
you can see that what this guy is interested in is promoting his health, plant-based diets, and he and maybe John McDougall and all the people that he used to know at the time that they were doing like they were um, in conferences all the time. Like I used to watch all these videos about these guys,
Yeah.
touring around and talking to hundreds of people about the health aspects of a plant-based diet. Yeah.
All right.
Best health. So in 1988, the secretary of the Vegan Society put an article in the newsletter saying we're trying to find newsletters from the early days of the society. Donald Watson saw this and he wrote a letter and he said, you might not know who I am, but I can give you copies of all of the early newsletters. And he was right. They didn't really know who he was, but then they figured out and found out, oh, wow, this is a guy who was involved in creating veganism. So at that point, they decided to give him this honorary award. This is the same title that was taken away by Leslie.
Just want to pause because there's a good comment here from Chris. It's worth highlighting again the website he sources all this from. No authors, not everything is sourced, and could even be a shill website for all we know. Yeah, I seem to
and I
remember
think
reading.
and I
Yeah.
think that the website is linked to his channel. I
Right.
think so. It's like, well, I found this site, but I wrote it.
So dodgy. Fucking hell. All right.
Cross in 1948. He traveled to London for that one event and then never took part in any other vegan society event or meeting again for the rest of his life. But right after he got the honorary vice president award restored, he was invited to write a column about the history of the vegan society. He didn't get very far. He just wrote a couple of columns and then he was cut off. And the reason being, apparently, he started to write about how the vegetarian societies had been so helpful and so instrumental in launching veganism. And this was a time in the early 1990s when the Vegan Society was in attack mode against the Vegetarian Society. And the last thing they wanted was some praise and gratitude being shown to the Vegetarian Societies for helping veganism. So he kind of stepped in it once again and he was out of there. One thing that you get from reading this page is that there are so many other vegan groups that are so much more effective than the UK Vegan Society. The UK Vegan Society is essentially irrelevant when it comes to veganism today. But where this website really leaves you is that veganism is a matter of conscience. And everybody's conscience is a little different. Having, like this rule book that's changing and that's a bunch of people, a small number of people in London are fighting about, and one person's getting control and changing it, and someone else is getting control and changing it. That's meaningless. You can simply follow your own conscience, as Watson proposed in the beginning. Eat a vegan diet to be a vegan, and then follow your conscience as to how far and what things you can do.
He sounds like that. Is it a Disney character? Is it like Jiminy Cricket or someone? That one, he goes, always let your conscience be your guide. Sorry.
And one of the things that this website also talks about is what we're seeing now, and it's not new. It was started with against Watson in the beginning, and that is the more vegan than thou, and that you're not a vegan and you're not a vegan. That came about because of Leslie Cross and his making veganism about animal rights, making a very strident, rigid, judgmental approach, as opposed to the Watson approach, which is eat a vegan diet and do the best you can and follow your conscience for the rest of the products. That brings in lots of people. That saves a huge number of animals. The little, arguing about how many vegan angels can dance on the head of a pin, which is the sort of the Leslie Cross, the cross vegan way, is ineffective and unappealing and drives people away. If you've ever been told you're not...
He sounds like Melanie Joy, like it is... Melanie Joy is always trying to, well, we have to be more tolerant towards the vegetarian people and all these allies, all these concepts that to me it has been proven to be the opposite. It's what's making people still make fun of animal rights activists and take the cause so lightly. Because if you trivialize the cause yourself, then people won't take you seriously.
Also, when he's talking about pushes people away, like it's kind of question begging. It's like away from what? Like away from the very thing that it's actually about. Oh, by promoting animal rights, you're pushing people away from not abusing animals. It's like, well, that's I don't like it doesn't really make sense what he's saying. And once again, even if his argument is, well, they can just eat a plant-based diet, again, nothing is binding them to that. Because the minute they find a way to make it work and be healthy while eating animals, they will just do it.
And also because they think in terms of suffering reduction and reduction of victims and all this. They don't think in terms of, well, what we need to do is to elevate the status of the animals so that they are finally respected as individuals with basic rights.
And I don't think this guy even cares about the suffering perspective that much anyway. I think he just cares about the selfish reasons, about human health. It doesn't seem he's trivialized animal rights so much throughout the thing, and it gets worse, I think, a bit later. I remember watching this documentary when it first came out in 2016. I haven't actually watched it all the way through since, so this is the first time in years that I'm and so this is it's kind of all new watching this again to me. But I do remember he says something, I swear, that's crazy, like in a little bit. How long have we got left? There's only there's only 4 minutes left. So hang on tight, guys, and thank you all for watching in the live stream. But there's only 4 minutes left of this, and then me and David shall summarize.
Vegan, you're plant-based, just know that you're in good company, because the same kind of thing happened to Donald Watson, the founder, the inventor of veganism. He was told by Leslie Cross and the animal rights vegans who came after him that he wasn't a proper vegan. In essence, I agree with Watson that there's a value in splitting animal rights and veganism. Veganism's like vegetarianism, it's about diet. A large number of people can grasp that. When you start putting in a sort of preachy animal rights thing into that, then you start narrowing it and get fewer and fewer people actually doing it, and you're not accomplishing what Watson set out to accomplish, which is to spread it, to get a lot of people going vegan. And there's certainly a place for animal rights. I myself worked in an animal rights organization for a couple of years, a dozen or so years ago, and
Holy shit, what was that organization that employed him? They need to take a look at this.
Yeah, it's as if these abolitionists of human slavery were saying, well, if we give them more, like if we allow people to have slaves, but we give them more, like maybe more longer chains and a few extra commodities, then the reduction of suffering will be greater. It's the same thing. It's like that they are these guys are not thinking about animal rights at all. That the animals deserve to be respected at the bare minimum by people not exploiting them.
Yeah.
Do support animal rights and a lot of different causes. And but this idea that in order to become vegan, you have to start micro-focusing on your fingernail polish and everything else, and that there's going to be someone out there, some animal rights vegan out there, who's going to call you on it if you're not doing it right, so that rather than the focus being, hey, how can we enlarge this, how can we save more animals, the focus becomes the ego vegan saying, wait, stop, no, you're wrong, you're bad, you're not vegan, you're plant-based, and all that nonsense that doesn't do anything for animals, that simply is for people's egos. The circular firing squad of vegans.
I think the ego is on the other side, like these people that want to pose as if they were just so comprehensive, like just so tolerant and so nice to everybody, and they just want to be liked by everyone. And what Chris just said, like the comment section is just to vomit. It's something to vomit.
Yeah.
Trying to out-vegan somebody else is that's a cult mentality. That's the cult, the law says this, it says you can't do this, you can't do that, and I'm going to interpret the law because I'm a high priest of the vegan cult. Watson was a guy with a lot of wisdom, and it seems like he anticipated the other cross vegans, because in 1947, he wrote an article for the World Vegetarian Forum, the summer 1948 issue. This is an independent journal, and as president of the Vegan Society, Watson wrote on this question of judging the consistency, as he called it, of the individual vegan. Here's what he wrote. The movement should grant to the individual the right to judge how best to meet each personal problem as it arises, and there should be no inferior section reserved for those who cannot live consistently according to the movement's definition. Loyalty cannot be measured merely by the standard of consistent practice attained, nor can a person's value to the cause be assessed in this way. So it's almost like Watson was foreseeing that a certain type of vegan was going to come along and have a purity test and try to attack other vegans and get more views on YouTube by doing that. And he said, no, that's not the way to go. That's not what veganism is. So I think that someone is doing what others are doing, trying to attack and tear down and find ways to bring down other vegans. That's not a vegan thing to do, at least if you follow Donald Watson. So reading this page, reading this website about the formation of veganism and the Vegan Society also made me think about some of the ego vegans that are making videos on YouTube today and presenting themselves as somehow understanding or interpreting veganism for other people. And I really think that they have gone off onto the weeds when they talk about things like, is abortion vegan? Are guide dogs vegan? This makes veganism look like a kooky kind of religion, like a cult, like it's a philosophy that you have to apply to everything in your life, which is nonsense. It's about a diet. It's about getting people to stop eating animals, and to the degree they can.
He was almost onto a good point there. He started off with, this whole bullshit that's going on about, abortion being included in veganism and stuff. And I was like, yes, good point, Jeff. Keep going. And then he starts talking about, forms of animal exploitation and blah, blah, blah. And he's talking about it being a kooky cult. I mean, for God's sake, man, off to such a good start, Jeff, and then you ruined it.
And wish to stop using animals for other products. But it's mainly about food. And when you start saying that, vegans need to vote in this political party, vegans need to do this in their life, something totally unrelated to food, you're making us look like loons. You're turning people off, you're turning people away, and vegan...
How long? So that's the final minute of the documentary, and he finally makes a great point. It took 43 minutes for Jeff to actually make a good point about veganism and the bullshit we see about voting for this political party and that. Yes, For once, you got it right, Jeff. It's not about this nonsense that we're often seeing in the vegan movement. You're not vegan if you vote for so and so. The arsehole I vote for, that's the vegan party that you need to vote for. Yes, but
and
apart,
you can read all the papers, and they never said they never mentioned a word about politics. Never.
Yeah. So he finally
they deliberately left it out.
Yeah.
Just because of this infighting, infighting over politics makes no sense.
Yeah. It's finally the one good point he makes in the documentary, right? Final minute.
Veganism remains this little small kind of fringe thing on the side instead of growing like Watson wanted it to. So go check the vegansociety.today website. Give this video a big thumbs up if you would. Tell your friends about it, and let's...
And that is the website I think Chris was mentioning a moment ago, that is possibly a shill site, or David, you were saying it's possibly even written by him.
Yeah, somebody told me like yesterday or the day before, that this site is linked to the channel. And I was like, okay. So
shady.
Yeah.
Spread the word. Now that the information is out there publicly about what veganism started as and how it was corrupted, go educate yourself and think for yourself. Don't be in a cult. Think and use your conscience to direct your own life as a vegan. All right, thanks a lot.
And it is over. Wow, look at that. So
I think
I was going to say, David, he's cut. You know, when YouTube vids go up now, you can actually edit them, and you can actually cut out bits. He cut out a bit there that I wanted everyone to hear him say. He's actually edited that video, and he's cut out a bit where he essentially condones animal abuse. There's a bit in the original one where he says that if vegans carry on harp at him saying you're not vegan, blah blah blah, he's gonna go into the nearest Chick-a-Filet and buy a whole load of Chick-a-Filet burgers, the chicken burgers, for a bunch of homeless people or something. I remember him specifically saying that. He must have got so much backlash for that, for being such an apologist, such a pro-animal abuser, by saying that bit, that maybe he was even slightly embarrassed about that, and he's actually taken that out, which is good. But still, that doesn't exonerate him of the other bad things that he said throughout this documentary that do seem to condone speciesism. He's massively trivialized animal rights throughout that whole diatribe.
Yeah, and also I think that we should show the interview that Watson had like in 2002, I think, where he mentioned
about Cross.
Where he talks about Cross, and he never says like we are enemies, or he kicked me out, this motherfucker.
Right. Let me get this up on the screen. Right, okay, this is significant. Thank you so much, David, for sending this in. So, just screen messenger. Okay, so this is the interviewer to Donald Watson, and
it's a guy called George something or something. I don't remember
Dr.
Yeah, it's the name of the guy.
And what year was this interview? Do you know?
I think it's from 2002. I think.
So this is from the noughties, guys. This is from our lifetimes. So this is in the few final years of Donald Watson's life. So Donald Watson dies about 3 years after this interview. A year or two before the society was formed, I was corresponding with a very small number of people, scattering far and wide. Leslie Cross, who founded the Plant Milk Society, was a great friend of mine. He died comparatively early, well, in his early 70s, I think. And in a letter he sent me, shortly before he died, he mentioned that, as a child, he'd fallen heavily from a gate and the authorities thought he might not recover. And I think if he had an early death for a vegan, it may have been the consequence of that. He was certainly one of the outstanding people who have served the movement, and in retirement he went up and down the country giving his lecture, Milk of Human Kindness. All voluntarily, of course, paying his own expenses and coordinating Frey Ellis and others, medical people who were interested in the idea of creating a plant milk that was acceptable. Some of the earlier efforts were pretty crude, but it was not until 1965 that my great friend Arthur Ling, who was devoted most of his life to creating and propagating the vegan idea, especially with regards to dairy produce, felt able to market and acceptable. Okay, so but the point is, he hasn't said a bad word there about Cross.
The opposite, in fact, is the opposite. He's praising Cross for his contributions to the movement. So this guy is saying, like, or he's trying to make people believe that they were just like these enemies. And well,
yeah, it's such a shame, and I want to thank you so much, David, for being the brains of this live stream, because you've got so much knowledge on this, and you've managed to, you've sent me all these very relevant screenshots that contradict everything that this guy has said. I mean, early on in the stream, we got comments saying, this vid was ages ago. How come you guys are responding now? And I replied saying, it's better late than never. This needs to be responded to. But I mean, you've all just seen it yourself there, folks. So you've just spent however many hours hearing this guy talking shit about the relationship Watson and Cross had. And then literally 2 years before his death, Watson is talking about what a great friend Leslie Cross was and how fantastic he was for the movement. So it's pretty hilarious that he's just shit talked about these two friends for however long, and just used this dodgy, by the looks of it, shill website to validate his views.
Yeah, I think, and I think it's so important to make sure that people understand that veganism was always about ending the exploitation of animals by humans.
Yeah.
Because all the problems we have today are also or also stem from that misunderstanding that, well, maybe veganism can be anything else. And all the infighting is maybe created from that point.
Was there anything else, any other screenshots or anything you wanted for me to read, David? But I think we've pretty comprehensively covered that video, and I think you especially have done such a great job, David. So I want to thank you for talking about that.
Thank you for inviting me, and I think all the screenshots. Well, there were more screenshots, but the main points are just clear.
Yeah, it's I think it's clear as day now, and I mean, even before the stream, I said before we even started playing the video, look, this guy might say some things that me and David don't really, we're not exactly sure where he's getting this from, but I think we've brought up all the quotes and stuff that contradict what he's saying. So yeah, David, I want to thank you so much for joining me today, and I think you're a great thanks, David. And I think you're a great credit to what we have in this movement, because you know the history much better than many people I know, if not anyone I know. So you've been you've been the perfect guest for this stream, and I think people have found this valuable. So everyone watching in the comments, please do share this stream if you found it valuable, and we'll see you again soon for another stream.
Thank you so much, George, and thank you everyone who stayed until here.